What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of Healthspan Academy. I'm your host, Craig Shearhart, and joining me today is my special guest, Dr. Patrick Vellner, who's reigning second fittest man in the world. He's 7-time CrossFit Games athlete, 4-time podium finisher, and what not a lot of people talk to him about is that he's actually a chiropractor who's super casually finished a bachelor's in kinesiology from McGill and then a doctorate in chiropractic from Canadian Memorial Chiropractic College. And we're going to talk a little bit about both. We'll talk about training methods and that kind of stuff. We'll get into his chiropractic practice and methods there as well. Patrick, so thanks for joining me today, man.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Cool. I want to start this off with how this path all kind of began for you. I know I had a bit of gymnastics background, some lacrosse and stuff, and then how you stumbled into this CrossFit thing originally.
Oh, I mean, I don't think it's unlike what happens to most people. I think that there's probably like two major routes that people go to kind of get involved with it. One is that their friends drag them in, and two is that they have some sort of athletic background and are just looking for a way to keep moving, right?
Yeah.
And so I kind of was like a little bit of both. You know, I had retired from gymnastics kind of shortly before I started doing CrossFit, and I just kind of met some friends at school who were like generally working out at the school gym around the same time I was. So you just get chatting with people, and they were doing kind of circuit training stuff. So I just would jump in with them to get some conditioning done. And it was very similar to some of the conditioning that I was doing in gymnastics. So I just got chatting with them and playing around with them, and then got, peer pressured into doing the open, and then kind of got sucked into what that means. And I mean, honestly, the open is such a cool thing because that's really what sucked me in. Is I got in, and I coming from an athletic background that I played a lot of lacrosse at a high level, was a reasonably high level gymnast, and so you think you're pretty good at stuff. There's not a lot of things that I can't figure out how to do, but you do this, and sure enough, I was very good at some things, but I was really outclassed in a lot of areas. So you kind of go, oh shit, like it really points out the areas that you could improve on. So it sort of just helped like then guide you. Like the next year of just working out, I was like, hey, you know what I want to do is get a little bit stronger. I got my ass kicked, that stuff. So it sort of helps to guide your training a little bit. And then the next year you get to check in again and see how you've done improving in those areas. So, I think that's what's fun about CrossFit to me, and is that there's so many things, so many metrics, so many balls to keep in the air that, it's super engaging. You've always got something that you can keep pushing a little farther. And just when you think you've mastered one thing, like, oh, there's a new skill that I got to learn now from scratch. True. And so I've always really enjoyed that. Yeah. And I mean, I came from, even in a sport like gymnastics, it's all about skill building and learning and motor patterns. And so I like that. And then, sometimes like a sport like lacrosse is just about putting your head down and out battling a guy. So I get a lot of that satisfaction as well. So it kind of it scratches all the various itches that I have.
That's cool. That almost seems like the storybook kind of, like if you think of like a tailored athlete that's for CrossFit, gymnastics, and probably lacrosse, something for speed, power, lower body training, that kind of stuff like lends pretty well. And it's, I think, encouraging probably to somebody hearing this to say that you actually struggle. I don't know how that compares to the average person struggling, but that's mind blowing, I think, to hear that you struggle, I think, getting started into it. At what point did you start to realize this was like something you could really give a good shot at, competing and making a career out of?
I honestly had a very fast trajectory, and I think, like you're saying, through my athletic background, I had a fairly good tailored profile, say, to be successful in CrossFit. And it just took some time to like learn the skills, figure out what, like the strategy of how you do the competition, like how do you compete in CrossFit compared to other sports. And that's a bit of just repetition and learning on the fly. And and then so I mean, it took me like the first season I did the open after doing like a year or a month of training with the guys, and then a year later I qualified to the next stage, and it's pretty linear, or at least then you went regionals or open regionals games basically, right? So it's easy to set a goal and say, next time I'd like to make it to this next goalpost. And so my second year I made regionals, and I actually took like 5th at our regional on the back of some like very strong gymnastics performances and some very weak weightlifting performances. And then I had an opportunity that next year to go on a team. I started training at a gym in town. Up to then, I was just training at the school gym, and I started working out at a box there. And basically, they said, "Hey, like, we'll train with us, and this coach will coach you and help you with the stuff you're struggling with, and in return, you'll compete on the team for the gym."
Cool.
And I said, "Sweet." And at the time, the team system was a little different, and it was a lot more geared towards high power output. It was probably the last year where there was a lot of specialists in the team side. So what it did is I was very good at, gymnastics. I had pretty good aerobic capacity, endurance. I needed to improve on my weightlifting, my power output, and things like that. Yeah. So I ended up just training those things for like an entire year.
Yeah.
And then that year pre-regionals, seeing the field that was competing and the people who qualified, I was like, you know what? Like, I bet you I could have qualified as an individual.
Yeah.
And so I did that year on a team, kind of made the decision then that it was like, I'll never do team again. I'm going to go back individual, and I'm going to do this and make a go of it. So I think that I decided like it was very doable. And, having had the benefit of like serious momentum going like open, next year I want to go to regionals. And then I just did it. And then, the next year I'm going to go to the games. And then I went on a team. Then like, okay, I'm going to go on individual now. And then I did again. It was just like, it's sort of, it's a young person too. You just like feel like you can't miss, right? It's been nothing but net for like 4 years. Yeah. So I was like, why not? And then the first year I went individual, I finished on the podium, right? So it was, very much like, my trajectory was very impressive. And I think there's something to having a kind of momentum to feeling like, hey, any goal I want to set is super attainable.
Yeah. And what puts it in perspective, just hearing you talk about it, when you say like your strength and power was like your weakness, and now you've got one of the heaviest deadlifts in the game. Does that make that much more satisfying when you see yourself pulling bigger weight than those guys around you at like the CrossFit Total and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, maybe. And I still would say that those are the things I struggle the most at. And I look at them as very enviable. And I think it's a bit of a grass is always greener side. Like I think people, I don't train my gymnastic skills really ever. Yeah. And I think people are like, well, it's sweet that you can just do that. And it probably is. But I also look at the guy who are just like heavyweight movers. And anytime there's like a 1 rep max clean and jerk, like you're guaranteed a top 3 finish. And that's like a 10-second effort.
Yeah,
it's like, man, when I go out there and I get a top 3 finish, like I am breaking my back for 15 minutes, and I'm like near death, like touching the sun. And then you just get to walk out there and clean and jerk and then pimp it and flex for the crowd. And I'm like, oh man, I wish I could do that. Like that looks awesome.
Yeah. You're earning your 100 points for sure.
Yeah, man, I can barely stand up. We always say that the big comparison was like, in 2018, we had to do the CrossFit Total. So that at least you had to do 3 lifts. Yeah. That was the year I hit a really heavy deadlift, but I ended up taking second in that event. And that's the first time I'd ever done really well in a strength event. And I was like, hey, that was awesome. I walk off the field, I give an interview. I'm like, I'm not even breathing heavy. This is fantastic. And then the next event we had to do that day, I believe, was the marathon row. And so my friend Lucas Eston wins the marathon row. Yeah. And so for my total of like 1 minute of work that I did in the total, I got like 95 points. And he rode his ass off for like 3 hours
to get the same score.
100 points. It's like, man, like which one would you rather? So sometimes I'm like, I still really look at that strength stuff. And I think, there's a point of diminishing return. I think you got to make sure that the rest of your skills are intact and it's not costing you anything, but it's the sexy stuff, right? Like that's what people like to see.
Yeah, true enough. So gymnastics, I mean, I wish I had that luxury of never having to practice, because that's like literally, if I'm getting a chance to skill stuff, that's literally all I'm doing. So you're a little heavier volume on the barbell. How has your training changed, would you say, most from like those early days of the gym? Is it like added more recovery? Is it like added like low intensity conditioning? Or what are the pieces you do more of now than you didn't do as much of early on?
I think the intensity stuff is a big part. I think just like, and I'm not old by any means, but like as you get a little bit older and you've got a stronger foundation, I think you don't need to And I don't know, you lose a little bit of that resiliency. Like I'm
Right.
not trying to fucking squat as heavy as I can 4 times a week. Like my body won't tolerate that as well as it did 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So you got to manage those high intensity days and low intensity days. So I build a lot of volume at like low to moderate intensity.
Okay.
On like 2 or 3 days a week. And then I pick my days where it's like, today is the day where like you're pushing percentages, you're pushing high intensity efforts, and you get that training in, and you just dose it appropriately. So
right.
We've found, like, we've played with it a bit, my coach and I, in the last couple of years, and that's a good recipe for me to stay healthy.
Yeah.
Otherwise you just, it's tendonitis here and, you got something else going on, and you just are constantly battling. And the best way to perform well over the long term is just to have more days healthy in the gym.
Yeah.
If you're constantly training, like half training because you're nursing something or taking days off, if you can just put together 2 full months of like proper training, that's valuable
for sure.
So yeah, we've done a little bit more focus on that. Frankly, I spend a lot more time doing like homework, like doing some physios, some rehab protocols, little things for various like nagging stuff I've had through the years.
Yeah.
And I've started to take that a little more seriously. And I'm past the point where things just spontaneously resolve with very little effort nowadays. Yeah. Like I got to be paying attention and doing a little bit of work, but it's just part of the job, right? So we pay more attention to that stuff now. I'd say I spend less time doing like high percentage weightlifting I used to.
More kind of middleweight volume stuff.
Yeah. And I think it's just because same thing, like it's just can be hard on you. Like if I'm just like pulling from the ground heavy 3-4 times a week, my back starts to bug me. Like I start to like, then I got to scrap 2 weeks of pulling from the ground and doing this and that. And so it's just trying to make sure that you're well ahead of it. And if you start feeling some of that stuff come up, communicating and being like, hey, my hamstrings are feeling super brutal. Like I think we'll do a little less of this for a couple days, or we'll dial back to running for a week and then see where we're at. So it's good. My coach is great at working with me on that stuff.
Yeah. So actually I want to talk about that a little bit because I chatted with her. I have a few cool stories I'm going to bring up. I want to hear your perspective on some of that stuff.
Sure.
But yeah. So, I mean, that's a nice luxury to have too, is that strength maintenance is always a lot easier than strength gain, right? So you can kind of dial back in the volume and just kind of pick spots just to kind of keep your numbers where they're at, as opposed to just grinding, trying to hit higher one rounds and stuff.
I've always felt that in the world that we're in, like winning a strength event is not really that valuable. It's usually a specialist kind of world. Yeah. But if you can hit like your 100% doesn't need to be mind blowing, but if you can hit 90% like any day of the week, that's all you need. Like the threshold to be competitive is not actually like crazy high.
Right.
Like if you can hit like a respectable number, but hit it reliably, then work on other stuff. Like you don't need to win the strength event, because to be honest, you won't. Yeah. Like there's guys like Guy Majeros and people like that who are just going to be too strong and like whatever. Like don't lose sleep over it. It's like just be better at the other stuff, because there's a lot of other stuff.
That kid is a freak, man. If he ever figures the rest of the game out, it's going to be lights out. Fun guy to watch too. Let's talk a little bit about that dynamic with Michelle. You guys competed together in 2016. Is that the first time you'd really trained with her or spent a lot of time with her, or how did that all start?
No, so the gym I actually competed on a team for in Montreal, she was one of the part owners there. Okay. So she would be there training occasionally, and I talked to her, whatever. And at the time, I didn't know her super well, but we were like, whatever you call it, acquaintances. Okay. And, then I worked with a coach there through that year into my first year as an individual. And then my coach then basically just kind of like, he had kind of as a greedy goal, like I'd love to train someone to the games as an individual and like perform well. And then we kind of did that. And he's just like, he was a guy that has all kinds of goals going on in his life. And he I don't even know if he like does any weightlifting coaching or any of that anymore. Like he's just kind of a very spontaneous type person. So he was kind of like, hey, I did my thing. And that year, Michelle was competing as an individual in her last season. Yeah. Sort of a very random, here. So this is kind of how it really took place.
Okay.
At the end of that season, he was like kind of stepping away as a coach and was like, hey, you should work with Michelle. She was just starting up her programming.
Cool.
And I had actually trained with Michelle for like half of that summer because my wife now at the time was staying in Montreal, and she basically she was in law school in Montreal, and then she got into school. She's gonna hate me for telling that, but she was living in Montreal, and I was living with her for like half the summer.
Right.
And then she was like, she got into med school in Calgary. And so she was like, I gotta go. Yeah. So in like the span of a week, she just bounced to the West again. And I was like homeless in Montreal. And so I talked to Michelle Latondra, and she's like, hey, come live with my partner and I and just train at my gym and whatever. Wow. Like we were both training for the games as individuals. Yeah. So she invited me to come live with her and train with her. And then at the time I was still working with my coach, but in the days where you're there, like with Michelle, like I do some of my own stuff, and then I would do some of her stuff. And then we just would kind of like, train all day and do our whatever and prep for the games together. So then post games, when I was talking to my coach and he said, you should just work with Michelle. I was like, yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. We kind of have already been doing it. We built a relationship already. And so, when she really like officially started her coaching, which was, I think after the Invitational, kind of more late in the year in 2016, I was like the first one to be like, I'm be thrilled to work with you. Cool. And I think she's amazing and super sharp. And she's just like I don't know. I think she's worked with a lot of coaches. She's easy to work with. She doesn't, she doesn't know she's right about everything all the time. Like she's willing to listen and adapt and is constantly learning. So, I've found that our relationship has been fantastic, and it gets better over time. And, That's she's awesome. Never given me any real reason to doubt her. And I think the results speak for themselves. So for sure, it's been fantastic.
Yeah, that's awesome. I've only had a few conversations with her, but you can just tell she's very bright and super passionate and genuinely cares. I think that's maybe the one intangible that like, I think you don't always get that from like an elite athlete, right? But she genuinely wants to see people do well, which I think is cool. There was a quote that you put on Instagram. Sorry, I was stalking you here a little bit. You said, in some ways, I feel closer to her than anyone else. And you said that on her birthday. And I get that kind of that coach athlete dynamic. There's really nothing like it. But talk about that, how you get to that point, like that coaching dynamics, how that relationship kind of like develops and where, like how you guys interact kind of like today. I feel like you have like old married couple interactions at times, like.
Oh, we for sure do sometimes. I'm sure I annoy the shit out of her on a regular basis. It's like, I think it's a little different too when you're physically with people. Like we do a lot of work together remotely because I'm on Vancouver Island and she's in Montreal. Yeah. We get together a few times a year for training camps, and she comes to most of my competitions and we work together. But like I'll FaceTime her very regularly. Like every day when I get my programming, we'll put some time out and I'll ask a bunch of questions about what we're doing and what all the goals are, how we should approach this, that, the other thing. And so it's effectively as if she's there with me. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's a unique kind of relationship because I think you see people's vulnerabilities, right? In a way that you don't in a lot of other contexts. Yeah.
A lot of coaches are afraid to go there, right? I think that's kind of
I was going to say, I think it's something you have to allow. Yeah. On both ends, on the athlete side and on the coach side. So for sure. I think that's what's been really cool is like, I don't know, like I'm a reasonably stoic person, but I think that with her, like that's part of the deal is like, you have to communicate fully. Like, how are you feeling? Like, how's the burnout going? Like, how's the whatever, right? Yeah. And I think that her experience as an athlete is where that's super valuable because, she's been on the other side of that too. Yeah. So she's like, hey, I know it's 2 weeks from the games and you want to kill me. So it's like, I get it. Let's talk about it. How is it, like, what's going on? Right. And so, there's a lot of layers to what it means to be an athlete and what that relationship looks like. So I think she understands it and she's happy to talk about it and nurture that side of the relationship, which I think is super beneficial. And, I think some coaches neglect a little bit, and there's a little bit of a like, I don't know, a hardcore attitude about just like being tough and ignoring that kind of stuff.
Sure.
But that's just like, but what it's about, like being a social person and like nurturing your like humanness. Right. Yeah. So she's very into that. And I think it's great. Like, I love that. So, if you're like drowning, you just tell her and like, she'll give you a break. Like, she's not like, well, this is what it is. And bury you in another week of like crazy training. It's like, if you need a break, like take a break. It's worth it. Right. For sure. It's all long term.
Yeah. She genuinely cares. And the moment I realized in perspective was when she told her version of the 2018 Battlegrounds, when you had that cargo net event, Fraser hit the deck. The whole I was there for that. It was the first games we went to see in person, and the whole crowd was like, "Oh shit, is he okay?" And then a second later, you eat it, hit the ground. I'm like, "Oh shit, is Vellner okay?" You guys both finished. You finished fourth in the event still. And then like all of a sudden you get taken to the hospital. I realized, or Michelle described this as, she didn't have a camera. She had no idea any of this was happening. Had no idea left. She found out, I guess, from Fraser. How much of that event do you remember? Do you remember, or the after effects? And then how did you end up talking to her afterwards?
I remember all of it.
Oh, really?
And so I think what happened and why people didn't really see it or understand what happened is because we ran out of the stadium and you did a bunch of the obstacle course out of the like main viewership area. Yeah. They had a big screen up that was showing all of that. And I guess a couple of the panels on the screen had blacked out. Right. And basically,
that's what she said.
That's where we fell through. So you like saw us slip. And then we like fell into the blackness of this blacked out panel. And then everyone in the stadium was like, what just happened? Yeah. And so no one had like, and then like the camera pans to something else. It's like, wait a minute, like, are those guys okay? Yeah. So I think people saw and knew that like something had happened, but they didn't know like how significant it had been. Right. Right. Yeah. But no, I know initially right afterwards, like I was getting checked out and they wanted to make sure that I had bruised my lung and I was coughing up blood pretty bad. So they wanted to get a CT scan and stuff like that. So I never went back to the warm-up area. They basically just took me straight to the hospital. Right. And Matt's a buddy. He basically was like, he walked back, and as soon as he saw anybody that like was with me, who's like, hey, just so you know, this is what's going on. Yeah. And and whenever I didn't have my phone with me or anything like that. Right. So,
oh man.
When I got back, I think the priority always in competition, whether or not this is the right thing, is that you just want to know if you can like continue. Yeah. So in our sport, you can either withdraw or they can medically withdraw you. Right. They're worried about safety. Yeah. So I had to like go to the head of medical and bring my images, and he had like to talk with the ER docs, and I was basically just like, what's going to happen? And
it's only bruised lungs.
Me. Yeah. And like, they
only
cleared
one,
me,
really.
So the whole thing was like, you fell hard enough to bruise your lung. So, if there's some internal damage, there could be more. The concern is that if you get your heart rate back up, is like a blood vessel going to burst, or is something worse going to happen? Yeah. So they're like, here's the deal. You're good. Like you can compete, but if you feel anything weird or off, you got to tell us like immediately. Right. You start getting dizzy, you start whatever, like gave me a few things to look out for. And I said, great. I think our next event was the sprint clean and jerk ladder. Yeah. So we, anyway, I got back and like Michelle was kind of just like, what is going on?
You're
like,
live.
Can you give me like details? And it was good. She was just mostly concerned that whether or not I was okay.
Yeah,
I don't think she cared at all whether or not I could continue. Yeah. But I think I was in like fourth place or something overall at the time, third or fourth place. So I was kind of like, hey guys, like I'm going to continue. Yeah. And they're like, yeah. But no, she was more concerned obviously about whether or not safety, I was okay. And then like we had to talk a bit about that. Like, all right, if things feel weird, what are we going to do? Yeah. And I think to a certain degree, it was a bit of like the rest of that day, you just kind of ride it out. And you don't know if you're just riding adrenaline or not.
Yeah, that's the thing.
And then
right?
I remember going to bed that night and talking to her, and she's like, well, we got to talk first thing in the morning and see how your body feels. Cause like you might wake up and feel like you got hit by a truck.
Yeah.
And then we got to figure out like what we're going to do.
Yeah.
But fortunately it was okay. Like all's well that ends well. But,
and then you got to decide, do I feel like I got hit by a truck because of my lungs or because I'm doing the CrossFit Games?
Yeah. Cause it's day 3 of the games. I know. And that was the kind of irony of the whole thing. It's like, hey, if your body hurts, I'm like, guy, my body's going to hurt. Like, I don't know what.
Yeah.
If you've been paying attention to what we've been doing.
Yeah.
But it's just going to get drowned out in the rest of the beating. So anyway, it was unfortunately, no ill effects and still kicking.
That's awesome. And still finished in the podium, which is unreal. Let's talk. So 7 years now, what, like, when someone mentions the CrossFit Games, what are the first images that kind of pop up to you? What are the big highlights for you over these last 7 years?
I mean, I don't know. I think that I like picture those kind of fun outdoor events, like those events on the North Field and Madison. And then, I only did 1 games in California. So I think to me, big games is really, it's more in Wisconsin. I guess I did 2. My team was also in Carson, but more of my career has been done in Wisconsin. So it feels more like there. Mm-hmm. I think you remember like the highlights and things of like those event wins, things like that. And you remember, for me, like I remember the lows too, like bike crashes and falling off the cargo net, things like that. Right. So it's not any one thing. It's sort of like, I don't know. And it's like this bittersweet kind of feeling about like, it's fun and it's exciting. And particularly when things go well, there's no better feeling. But like, man, you wonder every time like what you're doing. Like every year I'm at the games, like I remember this last year finishing that pig flip workout that I won and like sitting at the finish and somebody there with a camera was like, asked me like, how do you feel or something like that. And I just like, what am I doing here? Like, it's like this, like, I feel so bad. Like it was something like that. Like, how do you feel? Like, I feel awful. Like I feel so bad. Like I literally can't even stand up right now.
I guess everyone's capable of getting there. It's just like, it takes more work for you to get there than the rest of us. Like for someone stepping on the couch, they've got that same feeling after doing Fran like once, right?
Yeah.
And it's just all perspective, I guess.
It doesn't get easier. Like it doesn't get easier. You try to like win those events against the field of people that are there. Like you got to hurt to do it.
Yeah.
So, there's always those moments every year where you finish something and you're like, holy, what just happened? Like your body feels like it's just like melting. And, I don't know, but it's like I said, I think that's what makes the highs really worth it, right? Is that investment like that, right? Knowing like how hard you work to make that happen. I've been very fortunate, I think it makes it feel a lot better when you finish with a medal or you get some event wins or things like that. Like I have no doubt that the guy who finishes 20th feels the same way. Yeah. So it definitely makes it feel a little better when you come out with a finishing that, I guess from the spectator perspective looks terrific. Yeah. But, I think a lot of it is just, it's like pushing boundaries. And I think that I don't know, man, I like to think that I think you remember like some of the highlights, like you always run through the highlight reel of like what the stuff that you've done, the stuff you hope to do. Yeah. Cool. But yeah,
that's awesome. Let's talk, you kind of alluded to the mental aspect of this and you get mentally that point where you want to quit. Do you have like rituals going into a competition for the mental game, the mental piece, or is that just kind of on autopilot now?
No, I don't really. And I never really have. I think competing in gymnastics for a long time, you get pretty good at being able to just sort of like turn that on and put things to the side and try to perform on demand.
Fair enough.
But, I don't know. I think that you just have to learn like how you perform best. To be honest, like I try not to get too like get my shoulders up high and get too stressed. Like some people walk around like they don't want to talk to anybody. They're just like dialed and on. Like Like they are on 24/7 for 5 days in a row.
Yeah.
And that's so exhausting.
Yeah. That's how I feel like
be able to do that. So
the perception I have watching
learned,
Fraser go through it. I feel like until he quit, he was like, all his answers were kind of short, didn't get very analytical. Just like you could tell he was just zeroed in. Maybe you had a different experience because you're interacting with him, but that's like,
yeah.
But,
I think he was maybe a little less like that than he showed sometimes.
Fair enough.
But I think that there are those people though. And then that's part of their process for sure. And I generally try to not get in the way of people's, do what you got to do. Like, I'm not trying to like get in your head and mess you up before you go out there. Like, honestly, do your best. Like, that'd be sweet.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. I find that I generally do better when I try to keep it light. Like, I think you just gravitate to the people who are the same as you. And I think that there's a period, like when you're in the corrals or like the last 5 minutes of warm up before call, where it's like, all right, when we got to like, focus on what you're trying to do, like think about what the events are going to do. What are these transitions? Like, how am I going to approach this and break it up?
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of things to go over, but I think there's no sense for me turning that on too early, because it's just like, I don't know. I find that like I'm not as fun to be around, and it's just I don't think it makes a big difference to me performance wise. And the big thing is to me. Yeah. To some people it probably does, and that's fantastic. Like, keep doing it. But and I think you just tend to gravitate to the people that are similar to you, right? Like
true enough.
There are people, and you crack some jokes with them, and then you both are better for it, and then you take the floor. Like, and then if the guys who want to like hold their heads down and focus, they hang out together, we're all good. Like, you try not to get in people's ways, but fair enough. It's I'm very much more, I try to keep it light.
Fair enough. Let's dive into your chiro life a little bit, because I feel like that's just I don't know if there's another person on the world that is such casually a chiropractor. And I think like I looked up your bio on the site, and this is like, to me, this is like the most Canadian thing I've ever seen on a Canadian bio, where like, hey, like most of the chiros on your page are like Dr. so-and-so, Dr. so-and-so. And then there's just Pat Vellner. Like, there's no doctor in front. I don't know if that was by design or just by chance. And then you got your bio, you got your kind of like life interests, your kind of like lifestyle stuff, the people you like to treat. And then like, this is my favorite part. What you might not know about me: I compete yearly at the CrossFit Games. To date, I finished on the podium 4 times, just like the most casual thing, which I love. Let's talk about that kind of chiropractic focus. Do you have like a target clientele you're trying to work with, or what is your main focus in the clinic?
Not really, to be honest. I've only been treating now for 2 and a bit, almost 3 years. Yeah. I guess 2 and a bit years. So like, no, like I'm still learning, right? Like I think that I want to see all kinds of people and all kinds of things, and work with the other. I'm associate at that clinic, and I think that I love to take the opportunity to chat with the other professionals there, like the physios, chiros, RMTs, everybody. Yeah. Like, I love the multidisciplinary clinic for that. Like, take all the chances I can to learn a little more and hone my craft. And then, way down the line, maybe you decide to narrow your scope a little bit, but for now, I think it's good. And it's fun to challenge yourself with new things, and forces you to keep learning. And I think that if I was trying to stop learning already at like 30 years old, like that'd be a huge problem. Yeah. So, for sure. Yeah, I think it's good. And I think certain people gravitate to you. Like, I think I do get some of the Vancouver Island University athletes like that. Generally too, we're actually fairly lucky here because the demographic is very healthy. Yeah, you got a lot of people, because there's so much like everyone's just super active living hiking, to do, right? Yeah, it's like hiking, swimming, like kayaking, everything, biking. So people are generally like pretty fit already, and a lot of people, even in advancing age, who are just saying, hey, like, I want to just make sure I can keep rolling here. Yeah. So you get people that already have great goals and a great baseline of health, and they're easy conversations. Like, I think a lot of what I like to do or try to do, and people need it, is like lifestyle intervention. Starting those conversations is sometimes really difficult. Yeah. But a lot of what we do here, it's quite easy. So I'm very interested in that type of stuff, like just like getting the ball rolling for people in the pathway to like better health, just getting moving more, things like that. And so it's kind of funny, because here and typically the types of patients who may seek me out don't really need that.
Yeah.
So it's fine, but it's like, it's been good. Yeah. I've really enjoyed working where I'm working, and
Cool.
Yeah, I'll see a little bit of everything, you know, and
cool. Do you
just
find,
I think that,
do you find the deeper you get into the clinical side, the more do you have any light bulb moments on kind of your own recovery stuff, or does that been a factor, or like?
Sometimes I'll be working through something and I'll be like, maybe I should try that.
Yeah.
Because I will say that I get asked a lot, like if my education helps me with my own like body work or treatment and this and that. And like, it doesn't really. I would say in general, I just sort of put the two worlds separate. And I think that really, if I was going to think clinically about everything I'm doing as an athlete, I wouldn't do half of it.
Yeah.
Fair enough. I think that's a huge problem. I think as an athlete, sometimes you got to just be like, you know, whatever, it is what it is. And this is what I got to do to perform the way I want to do it. And there's some baggage that comes with that. Like elite level sport comes with some of that. And I think that's just the deal you make. So if anybody asked, like, I wouldn't hide that fact. And like, that's what it is. But so for me to be like, you know, ooh, how's my back going to be doing these 100 GHDs? Like, it's going to be bad. Like, it's like, that's what it is. And am I not going to do it as a result? Like, well, no, everybody else is going to do it. So if I don't, I come last. Like, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And then you just sort of, I think that I've made an effort to outsource kind of stuff so that I don't have to think about it. But I have, you know, colleagues at the clinic that I'll go see and be like, hey, here's what I've been doing. Here's what's been bugging me. And I let them work their brains on it, because really, I feel like all that happens if I do it is I try a bunch of things at home, and I have a hard time sticking to like a very specific protocol.
Right.
Because I'll just start sampling new things and be like, oh, I feel like this worked yesterday, and then I'll try that for a bit, and then I'll try something else, and whatever.
Just let someone else.
And I get very ADD over it.
Yeah.
Or I just ignore things because my athlete brain is geared to ignore that stuff.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that hurts. No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's the big conflict, right? Is you know, I have a good understanding of hurt versus harm. I think I try to make sure that I'm not doing any long-term damage, but the reality is that I'm geared to ignore when things hurt, and I just make it and just deal with it. Yeah. So, you know, I had a shoulder issue for a long time that I finally started to deal with a little bit properly. And it was because my wife was like, I like was putting a shirt on or something, and I was like, Winston was like, oh, and she's like, it hurts when you dress yourself. It's like, that's a problem.
5 days of the game's no issue, but putting on a shirt, man.
So I was like, yeah, you're right. And then we like made a better effort, and I got it back to a point where it's much better. Yeah. And like I said earlier in the conversation, like nowadays, it's just those things don't just go away in a day like they did when I was 25. Yeah. So you just like, you know, now I just have to like make a concerted effort, and that's not a big deal. Yeah. I spend an hour a day. Like when I'm watching Netflix, I'll just like get a dowel, do some shoulder stuff, like, you know, work on my hips a little bit, and it's sweet. Like on the ground with the baby, like it's pretty easy to do. You just got to do it. Yeah. So I've started to program my daily routine to reprogram it a little bit better around that stuff. Cool.
Let's circle back to your programming kind of leading up to the Open. Like I assume the Open should probably, I don't want to say a breeze, but should be okay. You're obviously aiming to peak kind of later in the year. What is the main focus right now as you lead up into the Open?
I think right now we're kind of rebuilding after Wodapalooza for me. Yeah. I haven't really, because I competed at Rogue and at Wodapalooza, I haven't really done any kind of strength phase in the off season. So I'm honestly probably going to do a bit of that, like through the Open and quarterfinals, take almost like a mini off season break there, where it's like not competitive training. It's more like building training, foundational training. The Open will not, it doesn't really, unless you're going to try to win it, it doesn't really mean much for the competitors. The barrier is quite low to get into quarterfinals if you're like a reasonable high level competitor. Yeah. And then the quarterfinals, you got to show up, because I think if it's only 5 tests like it was last year, you know, you make one mistake and it can cost you quite a bit. So you got to be reasonably sharp there, but then semifinals is when you got to be good. Right. So I don't know. I think you have to have some sort of a peak around that May, June for semifinals, because people are too good to not. Like, everybody's getting real good, and if you're like really coasting, you just don't go to the games.
It's a dangerous game. Yeah.
Yeah, you got to be some good version of yourself at that point.
Fair enough.
And just mostly a lot of it is staying healthy right now, like rehabbing some small things. Like, I had a bit of a back and hip injury December-ish. So just like making sure that stuff's good before we start building some strength and ramping up the intensity again. I don't know. Honestly, it's kind of nice. Last year, it was the same format last year for the Open and stuff, but it was the first time they did it. So I think people didn't really know what it would look like.
Yeah.
And after having one run through, I think a lot of athletes are excited to kind of just let it float by this year and not have to really hurt yourself in the Open.
Yeah, fair enough.
So I'm definitely in that camp. I don't need to win it. I won it once before, and I don't need to do it again.
Yeah, I feel you, man. Awesome. Well, Pat, this has been an unbelievable chat. I really appreciate your time, man. What's the best way for people to follow you? Instagram?
Yeah, Instagram is probably the only platform I really maintain. And that's at P Vellner. Cool. I'm on Twitter as well, which is at Vellner P, but I don't really use it.
Cool. Well, we'll link to that in the show notes. Awesome. Appreciate your time, man. Much appreciated. Good. Best luck in the
pleasure.
Open. Yeah. Ooh.
Thank you. Hold on. My baby just threw something in his mouth.
You all right?
What do you have? And now he's laughing at me. All right. I got to rescue him.
Cool. All right. Thanks for tuning in for this episode of Healthspan Academy, guys. We'll see you next time. Hey, what's up, guys? Thanks for tuning in today. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Thank you so much for supporting this channel. This has been a fun project. We're growing in viewership every single week, and we obviously couldn't do that without you. So thank you for continuing to tune in. I really hope you're getting value out of the programming and the content. Just wanted to give you a heads up. I've been working on a book on health and longevity the last couple of years, been collaborating with my colleague, Dr. Dan Vitale, who's an expert in the field as well. And we've basically just kind of summarized the literature, some of the techniques that we found really useful in the world of biohacking, what our exercise regimen looks like, what's, cardio type stuff is going to help us live longer and healthier, mobility work, nutrition. We've covered the whole spectrum, everything that you can basically be in control of in your health and fitness kind of moving forward to help you live as healthily as possible for as long as possible. And it's available free for download. So if you click on the YouTube banner, you'll see a link to download the blueprint. It's also on our Instagram profile or on the website. You can click on 5pillarmethod.com/optimize to get your free copy of the book. And I hope you enjoy it. Hope you're keeping well. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.